Hello and welcome to this video for today, whether you're here for the first time or you're returning. Hope you will enjoy. Hey there guys, how's it going? Getting into this video today, if you didn't see the header image, we are getting officially into our set review of D&D Adventures in the Forgotten Realms cards, and we're getting into red and white cards here for today, and we're starting off with some white cards. First white card is Book of Exalted Deeds. This is a triple white legendary artifact. Beginning of your end step, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, you create a 3/3 white angel creature token with flying, but then you can pay 3 white mana and exile the Book of Exalted Deeds, put an enlightened counter on target angel, and it gains you can't lose the game, your opponents can't win the game. You can activate that as a sorcery. Oh, only as a sorcery. But yeah, like, this is a decent-ish card for mostly life gain. Maybe some angel decks as well that want to take advantage of it. To be honest, it might just be a really quite good mono white card, because mono white needs more good things, and this is a fairly decent thing for them to have. It gives them some life, it gives them some tokens, gives them something to, build themselves up and actually play the game and whatnot. So it's not a bad card by any stretch. It is a limited card, and certainly it probably will only see play in mono white or very heavy white decks because of that triple white casting cost and the triple white activation cost. Look, I think that the activation cost, initially I kind of felt like it might just be a little bit of throwaway text in some regard, because I thought, oh, if somebody maybe goes to blow it up, oh yeah, sure, I have 3 extra mana laying around or whatever, and I'll just sack it or exile it and get rid of it and put this thing on one of my random angels or whatever, and for a little while I won't be, in a lot of trouble until somebody kills it, or until a board wipe happens, or something else, like, that's fine. But I've found out what you can actually do with this card is, and this is a little bit tricky because you've got to have the right cards in your deck and whatnot, but you can turn cards like Mutavault, which is a land, which basically has all creature type, when it's activated, and same with a couple of the other creature lands, they're basically all types. If it says it's all types, then it gets in this, it works this way. So what you can do is you can exile the Book of Exalted Deeds. When you've got that land active, put this ability on one of your lands. Now, your land's no longer a creature. It goes back to being a land that basically says you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. So you've just got this free land that says, or almost free land, that says you now can't lose the game, which is really strong and really powerful. Like, there's not that much land destruction, or specifically targeted land destruction, that a lot of people run. Yeah, it's more of a CDH thing, or a more modern, or more competitive sort of edge sort of side of things. So it's just not going to happen very much where somebody actually has the answer for your land specifically. Maybe when it's a creature it's more vulnerable, but even then it goes back to being a land during your opponent's turn, so they've really got to have instant speed sort of kill spells to get rid of it when it is a creature. So, and do they really want to use it on your land? I don't know. They might have to worry about something else that's on your board, maybe not in mono white, but I don't know, maybe they'll find something that one of these days they can give mono white that will actually be super duper threatening. But like, again, at least there is that option where you can work around it and build around it. And I think that application of suddenly my land now says I can't lose the game and my opponents can't win, that is much more relevant than just like, oh, it seems like a fine artifact or whatever, and I might throw it in my angel deck maybe, or if I have a life gain sub theme or a whatnot, I might toss it in there. Now it's just like, oh, my land is suddenly, keeping me from losing the game and keeping my opponents from winning the game. Oh, that's a nice combo you've got over there, opponent. Too bad you can't win. That's a nice board state you've got over there, opponent. Too bad you can't win because I've got this land. I mean, your other opponents can die and can lose. So that means it will come down to a 1v1 situation fairly quickly. And, if you're trying to go at it alone, it might not be the best. So I don't know. But again, it's just that little bit of synergy where you can go, well, it works with this, and it works with so many things that you didn't really think of before. You suddenly like, wow, there's all these avenues and whatnot that I can go down. And I think there's even some artifacts and enchantments that basically, when you do something, they become a creature until end of turn and whatnot, things like this. So there are other things that like that you can do with it as well. So there's lots of synergy out there, and I think it's a really great card that can see play in some decks. Very heavy white decks though. So next, Dancing Sword. I'm not very high on Dancing Sword, but it's a 2-mana equipment, 1 and a white. Equipped creature gets +2/+1. When the equipped creature dies, you may have the sword become a 2/1 construct artifact creature with flying and ward 1. If you do, it isn't an equipment and it equips for 1. Sure, you get an extra creature out of this when the equipped creature dies, which is okay. It's not amazing. So if you're a white deck or a Boros deck or whatever, a Lawhold, whatever they want to call it nowadays, as again I said, maybe you want this, maybe some Mardu decks, maybe we want it. If you're equipment tribal, you probably maybe want to think about it, maybe, but there's so many really, really amazing equipment. It's hard to say that this, goes in there, but if just as another equipment, if you need another equipment in your equipment deck, it's not that bad. Doesn't give any evasion, but if the creature dies, you get something out of it, and sometimes a board wipe happens and then you have like nothing. So having that 2/1 sometimes, once a board wipes happen, yeah, that's suddenly really good, because suddenly, oh well, I have nothing else, I might as well equip all my stuff to this thing and then kill someone. So it does provide you with those little benefits from, having those sorts of things happen or whatnot, or just an extra benefit. Or if that one creature you did have was your only creature when somebody went and killed it, it's like, well, now I have this thing that is a creature, and suddenly I can re-equip all my stuff and go back on the attack plan. At least it's something, It's not a lot, but it's something. Anyway, next, Guardian of Faith. 3 mana, 3/2, flash vigilance. So 1 and double white. Spirit Knight, when it enters the battlefield, any number of other target creatures you control phase out. So this is, well, mostly wrath protection for the most part, I would say. But it is on this body, which is quite good. So it can go into some like Blink style decks. So some of those value-y style decks would really like this. There was an angel that was in, I think was it Cowtime? Maybe, that it came out and basically, flickered a whole bunch of your creatures, or I think it was it was a 4 mana 1. Basic was Eerie Interlude on a body, I believe, but it said it was for non-angel creatures. So yeah, that was a card, and this is very similar in a way. Vigilance over flying, Spirit Knight over an angel. Now you can get rid of everything. You can even get rid of your tokens, and your tokens will come back into play because they phase out essentially. They're not there. It's much like Teferi's protection. Your stuff's just not there. for the board wipe to happen. I'm not super high on things like this. I think recursion is much better than having cards like this that just happen to protect you or whatnot. When you have it, yeah, sure, it's a great blowout or whatnot. It's a great gotcha card or whatever. But when you don't have it and then you top deck it after the wrath happens, you just kind of like, oh great, I wish I had have had this last turn. Now it just does nothing, or I've got to wait till I can rebuild to think about casting this thing. And then it's probably going to be too late because, you know, I've got nothing else really in hand. And how am I going to, you know, get back in this game? This isn't going to get you back in the game, whereas recursion will. So, you know, that's one of those things. But again, I still think it's pretty good, and some people will certainly run it, I'm sure, because it does help you protect your board when you need to, and especially in those token decks, you can at least keep your stuff so you don't have to eerie interlude everything away and undo all the work that you've been doing with all your token shenanigans and whatnot. So, yeah, I definitely think, yeah, we'll see a bit of play out there. Next, Loyal Warhound, 2 mana, 3/1 vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than us, we search our library for a plains card, a basic plains card, put that card into the battlefield tap, then shuffle our library. Look, you know, Knight of the White Orchid, yeah, basically the same thing for the most part. Yeah, Knight of the White Orchid's a 2/2, first striker. This is a 3/1 vigilance. Those stats and whatnot don't really matter. The effect that's on the card is what matters. You know, to be honest, did White need this? Maybe not. It doesn't, like, I don't want to get into this too deeply, but I don't really think that White actually needs that much ramp at all. I think, yeah, sure, some of the other colours like red have gotten some treasure style semi-permanent ramp and whatnot, but it doesn't have that much better ramp than what white does, really, and neither does blue either, really. It has some ramp for its instant and sorceries and whatnot, but black certainly does have a fair bit, if you're not on a budget, certainly. But certainly green, obviously, it does. But every other colour bar green, and maybe black if you've got a really good budget, doesn't have that greater ramp, really, you know. So I don't think that white needs that much ramp. Yeah, sure, this is nice. I'm not going to say no to this. This is a good card. But I just don't think that this is actually what white needs. This isn't what white wants. It needs synergies. It needs things that it can actually take advantage of. It needs card advantage. It needs other things like that. It needs, you know, things that it can actually actively do with its mana or with its cards or with its effects that are in its colour pie. So, yeah, this is good, and I think a lot of people run it because, yeah, sure, the double white on Knight of the White Orchid versus 1 and a white doesn't sound that much, but when you're trying to splash other colours, it's a lot more different, and this could go in more, you know, Mardu style decks, you know, Jeskai style decks, whatnot, that sort of thing, over, you know, the Knight of the White Orchid, because now you don't have to try to have double white pips. You have to only have the one white pip, and now this will get you a land into the battlefield. Yeah, just the basic planes, but still, a land is better than no land, to a degree. So, yeah, I definitely think it's a really good card, but I think it's not what white needs. It's nice that it gets it, you know, but it is a little bit of a thing that it's just got it just now. Like, it's, again, I understand the process that we're seeing these cards coming out is a bit slower than what Wizards is, because they're like a year or two ahead of us or whatever. But again, it's just one of those things. They're still giving green rocket fuel, like I said in the last video, and I'll continue to say it, and I might put this for another video, but again, they just keep giving the other colours rocket fuel, and yet they're just giving white sticks and stones. But anyway, We'll move on. Next, teleportation circle. 4 mana enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, you flicker something. You exile a target artifact, creature you control. Then you return it to the battlefield under your control. So, these Conjurer's Closet style effects are fairly popular. Like I was saying before, Blink decks are quite good, and it's nice that White actually gets this. This is a really good card for White because a lot of stuff in White, like we were just talking about Mr. Dogboy and his replacement there a minute ago, the Knight of the White Orchid and Loyal Warhound there. Both of those creatures, you know what they've got in common? They have ETB triggers. There's a lot of other ETB trigger creatures in White, and this just the thing that hurts White sometimes is like Panharmonicon. You play Panharmonicon and you've already got out 6 or 7 creatures. Those creatures you can't reuse or do something else with. This lets you go, okay, at my end step, I will flicker my thing and get an extra thing off of it. And then that will work with Panharmonicon because now it's re-entering, it's redoing its thing, and it's doing it twice. So those are really good effects. And again, it sort of, quote-unquote, does it right away. It doesn't literally do it right away. But if you play this on your second main phase and then immediately go to your end step, like, that's pretty much immediate. There's not that much difference between, like, playing it in one phase and it doing its thing in the next phase. It's basically, having haste at that point. So it's good that it happens immediately on your turn to start with. So, again, Conjurer's Closet is very heavily played. This is basically the same thing, except it is White. Yeah, I definitely think that this can see play in a lot of Blink decks, most Blink decks probably, just as another value blinking style effect. So yeah, I definitely think that this will see play in mono White as well, because again, it'll just take whatever it can get. An extra value card like this will be highly sought after. Next, we're getting into the commons and uncommons now. This is the first uncommon. Ingenious Smith, 2 mana, 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Whenever one or more artifacts ETB under your control, put a +1 counter on Ingenious Smith. This ability triggers only once per turn. So the top ability when it enters the battlefield is what I think you mostly really want to care about. If you're an equipment deck, if you're some sort of artifact deck, this could be a nice little cantrip. And again, it sort of does work well with the teleportation circle that we were just talking about. It also works well with Panharmonicon style effects. If you can double up its ETB trigger, now you're drawing 2 cards for 2, and you can again flicker this. So that means again you can get additional extra value out of it, drawing essentially more cards. And you're not just drawing a card off the top, you're drawing one of the cards from your top 4, so you can essentially, if your deck is built right and built with enough artifacts, you can actually get the best artifact in your top 4. That's not that bad. Scry 3, draw 1, and put the rest to the bottom isn't that bad. Or Scry 4, draw 1, isn't that bad at all on a 2 mana body. This is a huge upstep from a lot of things that we've seen. And again, it's nice, but again, it's just not quite enough. I wish they'd put more rocket fuel onto cards like this. It's just fine, but it's not brokenly good, which is what everything else is getting, unfortunately. Seemingly, at least. Next, plate armor. 3 mana equipment. 2 and a white. Equipped creature gets +3/+3 and has ward 1, and it equips, but it equips for 3, but if it equips for 1 less, the equip cost costs 1 less to activate for each other equipment we control. So it's pretty easy to get 3 equipments on the battlefield. So then this is equipping for 0, which is really good. Yeah, the upfront cost of having to pay it for 3 isn't great. Now, I would think that this mainly sees play in heavy white decks or, whatnot, to a degree, or more maybe mono white decks. But again, it's still an okay equipment, but it's not great. But the fact that the equip cost is 0, or going to be 0 very most of the time, for +3/+3, which is a pretty good buff, and ward 1, that's okay too. So I do think it can see some play in some equipment decks. If you're really hard up on a budget, maybe. If you don't have that big of a budget, I still don't think it's terrible, but it's certainly not the best, and there's just a lot of better options. So it does get beat out by a lot of the competition once you have a bigger budget, but if you're on a lower budget, I would consider it if you can splash into white somewhere. And most of the really good equipment decks are in white because a lot of the tutors and a lot of the card effects and whatnot are in white. So yeah, I definitely think it's quite good in certain decks. Next one, and I think this is the last one of the white ones. Yeah, it's the last one. Minimus Containment, 3 mana aura. Enchantment aura. You enchant non-land permanent. Enchanted permanent is a treasure artifact. With tap it, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Look, this isn't thrills and spills and bills, but I think this is actually okay. I don't think it's quite as good as some of like generous gift or whatnot. It doesn't literally kill the thing that you're targeting with this. They can still have their whatever creature on the battlefield, but it's a treasure now. And are they going to sit around and try to draw into their beast withins or generous gifts or whatever they have to destroy artifacts or enchantment? Maybe against a red deck, it's probably just like, well, you'll never answer it. Or black decks or whatnot, you'll just never answer it. Maybe even mono blue or whatnot, almost never answer it. So, against those decks, it's probably just a card they can't answer. Against certain decks, yeah, sure, they might have the answer, but if you're enchanting someone else's thing, what do they care that their thing is a treasure? So it also incentivizes people to be like, well, you know what, I haven't drawn the thing to get rid of this stupid containment thing on my creature. I might as well just sack it for mana. Maybe I'll get the recursion for it later. Who knows? But again, I just think that it makes people more likely to get rid of their own thing, and you get your card back in that way, a little bit, so that you can, you've got maybe 3 mana basically make you sack your own thing, but you get a mana in exchange essentially. That's not that bad, I don't think, or 1 temporary mana at least. So that's not that bad. That's kind of like Swords to Play. Oh no, Path to Exile, sort of a little bit, but it is 3 mana and it is sorcery. So I don't know. A lot of these enchantments, like pacifism style effects or whatever, the exile a thing until this leaves, whatever. Yeah, sure, they're not that good, but this one I think's okay because it is in the control of the player that you're putting it on, creature, whatever, or permanent, again, planeswalker, or artifact or enchantment. You can do it on all those things, but again, for the most part, it will be on a creature, I would say, for the most part. But again, it could be on something else. So, again, yeah, it is in their control, but I still think most of the time, most people aren't going to want to have to deal with trying to find the answer to it. Yeah, sure, sometimes it's going to happen, but, again, for the most part, it's just like, well, I might as well sack it, so I think it's all right in certain decks, certainly. and might see some play. Next up, we're moving on to red. First red card is Zariel, Archduke of Advents. I can't quite read it because her mace or her whip is in the way a bit, so it's a bit hard to read it as well. They give all these crazy names. I don't know. They just try to stuff me up, don't they? But anyway, 4 mana, 4 loyalty, Planeswalker, 2 and double red. So +1. You get +1/+0 to your creatures and haste until end of turn. 0 to make a 1/1 devil. When it dies, you ping something for 1. -6, the ultimate. You get an emblem at the beginning of your first combat on your turn. Untap target creature you control. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. So you get to untap one thing every turn and re-attack with that one creature that is untapped. So you get an additional combat for that one creature mostly. I think, like, a lot of the time you want to base your assessment on Planeswalkers on the first 2 abilities. You don't want to look at it like the ult, because the ult, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get there unless you're really able to protect it. So +1/+0 and haste to your creatures, not that amazing. Fervor is haste to your creatures. Domri Raid is haste to your creatures on a +1/+1 counter, I believe, or +1/+0 is the other one, I believe, as well. So, or no, it's Riot with the other one. They gain Riot, so they can be get a +1 counter or haste. So you mostly give them haste or whatnot if you're aggro. So I would look at that as like this is an aggro ability. The 0 essentially is kind of a protecting or more controlling kind of thing. Getting a 1/1 that pings for 1, just okay, not amazing. It doesn't protect the Planeswalker that much. So I don't know. In certain decks, maybe, but where? I don't know. In really aggro decks, yeah, sure. It doesn't draw you cards. That's the thing. I think red Planeswalkers, the most played ones, draw you cards in some way or another. This one doesn't. There's not that much synergy with any of this other stuff. So, but again, that last ability, when you look at it, it isn't bad. And if you're a Voltron deck, maybe that would be really good. Or even if you're just like got one really big creature for the most part and you want to punch in again, that ultimate is quite worth it if you can get to it. You know, again, so I don't know, but like there are other things that basically give you an extra combat and untap all your stuff. So I don't know whether it's worth it, but it's a decent Planeswalker at least. I think it's more decent than some of the other walkers that, you know, have been shown in the set. So I think you can see play in some decks, but yeah, I think you need to find the place where it sort of fits for you. Next, Hobgoblin, Bandit Lord rather. 3 mana, 2/3. So 1 and double red. Goblin Rogue. Other goblins you control get +1/+1. You can pay 1, tap him. Hobgoblin deals damage equal to the number of goblins that enter the battlefield under your control this turn to any target. Oh my god, this is fairly strong in a goblin deck. Look, we all know Kranko makes about a bazillion goblins, and, you know, those goblins always have haste somehow and whatnot. So when this taps and pings somebody for, you know, 20, 30 damage, and then the Kranko player hits everyone for 30 damage, a lot of people are dead, like, or at least someone's dead, or even more, again. So this can be a really good effect. You have to probably be goblin tribal, but of course there are a couple goblin tribal decks. But outside of that, I don't think it's got much play to it, but it's a really decent, good card in those decks. So, yep, decent at least in those decks. Next, Xorn, which is such a weird name. 3 mana, 3/2, elemental. If you would create one or more treasure tokens, instead create those tokens plus an additional treasure token. This is quite good. Like I said before, Red does have a few things, mostly pirates, that make treasures. They're in weird ways and whatnot and things like this. But again, there are some things. So this is a really good thing. For red decks, when you're making treasures and whatnot, there are a few decks that are out there that want to care about treasures. There's the new Rakdos commander that cares about treasures. There's a couple other commanders that are out there that sort of care about treasures or care about the token in some way. So again, I think this is a really great card. It will fit in a lot of different decks. Elemental, maybe some people will look at Elemental and think it goes into Elemental Tribal, so maybe it will, but again, I just don't think you need things like this because you've already got good green things in most of those Elemental decks, so you don't really need to make treasures that much. So I don't know about that, but again, if you want to toss it in and it's just another Elemental that you just so happen to have, yeah, sure, absolutely fine. But again, I just think if you're not green and you're got red in your colors, you just jam this thing in there because anytime you make a treasure, you make an additional treasure. So that's really quite good. So I definitely want to put this in a couple decks as well. Like, I've got a couple decks where this will find a great home. So hopefully I open one, and hopefully if I don't open one, it won't be too expensive to get one. But yeah, I expect it might gain a little bit of price because I'm sure a lot of people will want it. Next is a new type of enchantment, the class enchantment, barbarian class, 1 mana. So at first, when you play that 1 mana, you get an enchantment that basically says if you would roll 1 or more dice, instead you roll that many dice plus 1 and ignore the lowest roll. And then you have this ability to quote-unquote level it up. Level up the old school mechanic that they've had for years, mostly on creatures. Now it's on enchantments. So now level 2, you get for 2 mana, whenever you roll 1 or more dice, target creature you control gets +2/+0, gains bonus until end of turn. Then for 2 and a red, which gets you to level 3, creatures you control have haste. So a little bit more expensive further at the end. I don't know what to really make of the second one, but cracks are the thumb for the first one. Look, there's not that much in the third or the second levels, but those aren't terrible. They're all pretty good since they're all on this one thing. And when you've got these class enchantments, essentially you've got each effect on the enchantment until it dies, essentially. Once you've leveled up, you still have the level 1. Once you level up to 3, you still have the level 1 and level 2. So all these abilities combined seem quite good once you get there. But I just think that the dice rolling decks will want this so much, just to get that first part. Once you get anything else beyond that, if you really care about the first part, I would definitely think about it. I wouldn't worry if you care a little bit about the second one or third one. Don't worry about it. You really need to care about that first one because you're getting that first. But once you care about that, first one, the rest of it is just gravy and does the effects of 2 or 3 maybe fairly good artifacts and or enchantments that you would probably run anyway. Instead of having to run all 3 of them or all 4 of them or whatever, you could just run this one card and get the same effects out of it. Yeah, it's a little bit more vulnerable because eventually somebody's going to kill it or whatnot, whatever, but sometimes that just doesn't happen. So, again, it's a really good effect, and, again, if you really care about these sorts of effects, I would definitely consider it, for your deck. Next, another Goblin tribal card, 2 mana, 2/2. It's called Battle Cry Goblin, and you pay a red and a 1 and a red. And goblins you control get +1/+0, gain haste until end of turn. It has pack tactics. Whenever you attack with creatures with power 6 or greater this combat, you create a 1/1 goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. So you just create more goblins. This is what goblin decks want to do. They want, haste and a buff, and they want more goblins. And, just this free value seems pretty good. You're probably going to have 6 power worth of creatures attacking most of the time. So that's not too bad. Again, especially since you can pump your goblins, so you can easily get them bigger as well with this. So I definitely think it's just a goblin tribal card, but it's a decent one, so I would look at it if you're a goblin tribal. Next, Red Dragon, 4 double red for a 4/4 flyer. It has Fire Breath, so when ETB is under our control, it deals 4 damage to each opponent. Now that's pretty darn good. 6 mana, it doesn't sound that good to do 4 damage to each opponent, but that's 8, 12 damage when you cast this thing. So 12 damage for 6, that's not that bad. And then if it, survives, which hopefully it's going to do, you can punch in there with this 4/4 flying dragon, which isn't too bad, So I definitely think it's probably just prone to dragon tribal, maybe some mono red burn or burn style decks, but mostly I would say it's a dragon card because it's a dragon and people want to run their dragons, but maybe it's more mono red dragons because there's so many dragons now that are much more impactful than this, but still it's impactful to a degree, does something right away. That's not that bad. So yeah, I definitely think you can see play in some decks. Next is Boots of Speed. 1 mana, equipped creature gets +1/+0 and haste, and you equip it for 1. Another Lightning Greaves, quote unquote, essentially, or Swiftfoot Boots, isn't that bad. There's a few creatures that would want the haste. There's a few creatures that will want the +1/+0. So I think that this is really good. This is incredibly good. Yeah, sure, it doesn't give any protection, so I wouldn't look at it like if you want to protect your commander. You want this if you want your commander to, or your creatures or whatever, to immediately do something. You need your creatures to get into combat, or you need them to tap or whatever immediately, or you want to get immediate value out of them. So that's where I see this, especially with the +1/+0. I definitely think it's more geared towards being a combat style effect. It is kind of whatever. What was the spell that basically gives +1 expedite? I think is what it's called. Yeah, I think that's what it's called. It gives +1/+1 and haste to a creature. So this is the kind of equipment version of that. So yeah, I definitely think that this can show up in any red deck or any deck that contains red at least, where you want your creatures to have haste and you might often want them to punch in. Next, and this is the last red one, a Basin Dwarf, 2 mana, 1/3. Whenever you roll 1 or more dice, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So this is a nice little payoff for dice rolling style decks, but that's pretty much it. But it is nice little payoff, and maybe somewhat of a win condition for those style of decks. But after that, that is it for this one here. Now, as I try to do with these, I try to, instead of just like running away and going off into the sunset with the other ones, because I don't think the other ones need a bigger discussion as much as what red and white do. I think white actually needs the bigger discussion than what red does nowadays. But I certainly still think that I often find that I want to discuss how well these colors did in comparison to the other colors and whatnot. So, having looked at the set, it's not like these colors got nothing, but when we're going to come to the other colors, they got quite a bit. And it's just, again, I want maybe to express some of this in another video, but yeah, I just kind of feel like, and again, I understand that the process is happening, quote unquote, but again, it's just like, well, you say that, or they say that, but again, I don't know. It's just like, again, it looks bad when green's getting rocket fuel again, and you're just giving sticks and stones to white and even to red to a degree. Even though they've given red quite a bit in the last few years and it's gotten a lot better, again, it just kind of it makes you feel bad, and it makes you feel a little guilty for playing pretty much the best color in Magic. So yeah, I don't know. But anyway, guys, hope you've enjoyed. Tell me what you think in the comments below. If you would like to further support the channel, you can go onto our Patreon. You can also get social with us on our Facebook. To follow all the updates, make sure you hit the like button. And on our Discord, to get into it, please leave a comment and I'll send you an invite. All links are in the description. I hope you have enjoyed this video here today, and if you have, please consider liking, sharing and subscribing, and I hope you will come back for another one. See you then.